Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Leadership Trail Mix. In Portuguese, we have a famous saying that goes kind of like this: good intentions, hell is full of them. No, we're not going to discuss religion here. But this is a good example of my intent having an impact different from the one I had in mind. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I don't know why, but I love the framework these two words provide us and how being able to differentiate the two can help us be better leaders and communicate more effectively in a way that builds people up instead of tearing them down. This reflection on intent and impact is kind of a build on the latest one, singularity and compassion, where we talked about the importance of curiosity, intentionality, and clarity. So if you haven't checked it out, you may want to listen to it after you finish this one. I have a passion for languages, and when in my late teen years I realized that I needed English to be able to more effectively communicate with the world, I didn't have money to pay for an English course. At that time, in addition to watching the movie Love Actually dozens and dozens of times, I started to read the dictionary. Since then, I developed this thing that, whenever applicable, I look for the meaning of words in the dictionary to either confirm my understanding or learn something new. The only difference is that now I use Google. Okay, I said all of that to introduce the meaning of intent and impact before we dive deeper into the applicability of it in our lives as people leaders. Among the many definitions I found, here are the ones I picked from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Intent is having the mind, attention, or will concentrated on something or some end or purpose. Impact is the force of impression of one thing on another, a significant or major effect. We could go in so many different directions here, but as I mentioned in this episode's intro, today we'll focus on communication. Communication is probably the easiest way to identify the difference between intent and impact. How many times have you said or heard, "There is a misunderstanding here," or "Wait, that's not what I meant"? I'm sure the answer is something similar to countless, right? It's so easy for words to get lost or reshaped or even misshaped between the sender and the receiver. Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalyst and psychiatrist, said something about that. Communication is the success of the misunderstood. In other words, while you know what you said meant to you, you won't be able to know for sure what it means for the other person, and in most, not to say all cases, it will mean something different because we are different. The weight of the words, their meaning, everything about them will depend on who we are, and the understanding of them will depend on who the person who is listening to them is. So, while we know what the intent of our words is, we have no control over the impact, which gives us two options. We can decide to be careless about the impact since it cannot be controlled, or we can decide to be intentional about the impact, or, as I will expand on today, start with the impact and then shape the message in a way that aligns to the intent as much as possible and hopefully generate the expected outcome. The beauty of this framework, and maybe that's why I love it so much, is that it applies to both the sender and the receiver. Let me share a couple of examples, one professional with me as the message sender and one personal with me as the message receiver. And just to be clear, while the two examples I will share are positive ones, I mess up on this all the time. We are all on the same journey, folks, and awareness is super important so that we keep progressing. Also, I don't believe this framework, or mostly any framework if I'm being honest, can be taken and applied blindly. You have to make it your own. It needs to make sense to you. What comes first and second is a chicken or the egg, potato type of discussion, so feel free, or even better, please do add a pinch of salt or any other seasoning of your choice to it, okay? Let's start with the sender example. Years ago, I needed to deliver a difficult piece of feedback to a leader who, in a group setting, said things they shouldn't. I knew it wouldn't be an easy conversation, and it started with the impact. What is the impact I want this conversation to have? Well, I want this person to leave understanding the mistake they made and the implications of it. And what is the impact I don't want it to have? I don't want the person to feel personally attacked, get defensive, or hide behind excuses. From there, I move to the intent. Why am I having this conversation in the first place? Oh, because I care about this person and I see the potential destructive effect of their behavior in the company culture, their team, and their peers. After that, and only after that, I was ready to craft the message. I played in my head the words I would use, the sequencing, and most importantly, how I would use intent and impact to frame the conversation. I actually started the conversation with it by explaining my intent and expected impact, but also being clear on the impact I didn't want to have. I then went ahead to describe the behavior I saw, the impact it had on me and on the team, and asking what was their intent. Then we talked about the disconnect between the two and the potential ripple effect of that. But before, the person tried to blame someone else for their behavior, which, because I prepared for that conversation, I knew exactly how to respond to. At the end, the person apologized, thanked me, and years later recognized the importance of that conversation in their personal development. Well, let's move now to the receiver example, which is a lot less romantic, if you will, and more self than other focused. English is not my first language, and for some reason, the sentence, "I don't care," rubs me the wrong way. My brain seems to process it as if the person was being rude, most likely because my brain looks for the translation to Portuguese and finds "não me importo" as the closest option, which means this is not important to me, but with a negative connotation. When I moved to the US, it was hard to hear people say that, including at work, and not have a gut reaction to it. Then I met Jim, and after I heard him say "I don't care" a couple of times, I had to ask, what does that mean to you? Once he explained that for him it was the same as "I don't mind" or "I'm happy either way," I got the clarity I needed, but it still felt like I needed to tell him the impact of those words had on me. So I did. Since then, I see him avoiding it, but every now and then it happens, and because we talked it through, I know his intent, and it doesn't impact me anymore. What is the moral of the story here? Well, you probably have your own, but my intent was to showcase that when we are clear from the get-go, not only with the impact we want to have, but also with the impact that we don't want to have, and also with our intent, we increase our chances of getting a successful outcome from the unavoidable miscommunication we all get involved in, day in and day out. Going very tactical and practical, here are a few suggestions of what works for me when navigating communication through the lenses of intent and impact. Number 1, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. I really believe in the power of kindness and its ability to open doors and hearts. Choose kindness, even when you're not getting it back. If your intent is constructive and good, there is no reason to be harsh. A good way to demonstrate kindness is by thanking people for their time or recognizing something they are good at or the positive impact they usually have on you. That, in itself, helps people feel seen beyond whatever they did and the negative impact it had on you. Choosing kind words can also go a long way. Number 2, announce it. When I'm about to say something that I know can be controversial or be interpreted in the wrong way, I start by announcing it. Look, I'm going to say something now that may come across as very pointed, okay? So buckle up. That usually puts a smile on people's faces and prepares them to receive what I have to say with curiosity, to understand what my intent was. Number 3, focus on the event, not on the person. I recently came across this image created by Roberto Ferraro, who I follow on LinkedIn and get a lot of inspiration from. In the image, we see a huge bomb with the tag, "I am stupid," right next to a tiny bomb with the tag, "I did a stupid thing." While Roberto was focusing on self-talk, I think this principle is super applicable to talking to others too. It should never be about who people are, but about what they did and the impact it had on us. And lastly, number 4, be aware of your position. And to talk about this one, I'll have to touch on numbers 1, 2, and 3. Someone's hierarchical position adds a lot of weight to their impact, so they need to be even more careful with their intent. I find it fascinating how some people seem to forget what it felt like to interact with higher-ups in their organization when they were in the beginning of their careers. No matter your intent, if you are higher up, if you have a C in your title, if you are someone else's boss's boss, or even simpler, if you are in a position of power, no matter how big or how small, how high or how low in the hierarchical pyramid, there is an inherent weight to your words, and they will matter for someone. Because of that, someone's position should not stop them from being kind, but should make them even more kind, given the weight the words carry. Someone's position should not prevent them from focusing on the event, not on the individual, but should make them even more careful, since a personal attack from them has a bigger destructive potential. And someone's hierarchical position should remind them to announce their intent even more and communicate with twice as much clarity. This applies to questions, to comments, to asks. A colleague asks you, "How did you get to these numbers?" And your boss's boss asks you, "How did you get to these numbers?" Does it feel the same? Another one. Your boss asks you, "Have you thought about having this light be blue instead of yellow?" And then your boss's boss's boss asks you the same question. Would you answer the same way? Would the impact of such a question be the same on you? So, approach each interaction asking yourself, can my position have a stronger impact than the one I'm intending? If so, how can I make sure my intent and my impact are aligned? As we approach the end of this episode, our call to action today can take many different forms, but the goal is the same. Can you make sure that when communicating with others, your intent and your impact are aligned? Depending on where you are on your leadership journey, depending on your everyday reality, pick one of the 4 very practical ways that I mentioned today and test the waters. Apply it and see how it goes. If you feel like sharing your experience with me, or maybe if you have a different practical way to align intent and impact, send me an email, miguel@leadershiptrailmix.com. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you. That's all. Thank you for listening. Take care and talk soon.